the okay, recording. Okay, so basically the plan for today is to discuss 5 questions that were put together initially by David Pope, refined slightly with, I think, added to by George. They've been looked at in 3 or 4 working group meetings already to try and refine, add to, subtract from, try and get 5 defining questions, because on the 23rd of November, we've got a very big meeting with a panel of 3 very significant people, including George, of course, and an advisor to the Levelling Up Committee. So once we've got our questions and during that meeting again, refining, adding to, validating, those questions will be directly put through to the members of the Levelling Up Committee he works with. So we have got an actual direct access there, which I think we need to make the most of, and make sure we put our not just our best foot forward, but make sure that we go in there with exactly the things we need to know. Debbie, sorry, I'm usurping you.
No, I'm sorry, I'm a bit late, and I've got builders, so I'm going to keep myself muted, and I'm also in a room with less bandwidth, so apologies for being late and interrupting.
No, you're not. Believe me. So, as I say, that's the plan for this meeting. Now, could you put the questions up?
Yeah.
Now, from experience of the last 3 working group meetings, most of the time was taken with question 1 and 2, actually primarily question 2. So we'll bear that in mind, and I think the bottom 3 will whiz through pretty quickly.
Jess, I can't see anything yet. Oh, right, okay.
No, sorry, is it just a bit slow?
Yeah.
There we go. So the first one is, how do you determine which buildings are in scope under the BSA and the FSA, and who will be doing the reviews? George, do you want to kick off on that one?
Yeah, so just to explain, there's obviously a perception that all of this is about 18 metre plus buildings, whereas of course the Fire Safety Act, which a lot of the legislation actually relates to, is for, as I understand it, all buildings, and therefore a lot of the provisions that are enshrined in the Building Safety Act aren't just relevant to 18 metre plus buildings. And the second part of that is who will be doing the reviews. That is coming from the perspective that the HSE is effectively, or seems to be effectively, outsourcing some of the work to building control firms, who then have to become certified to actually undertake that work. So that was something that, sort of emerged, well, from my perspective, in the summer. So therefore that has an impact, and that feeds into the next question.
Okay, great. Anybody else got any comments on that? Agreements, disagreements?
Well, just an observation that I can understand why. It's because of the scarcity of resources within local government, I think, isn't it? But yes. Initially the intention was to kind of refocus that responsibility, building control, to the local authorities, wasn't it? And to not do away with the private sector ones, but to lessen their power, I guess would be. And that's definitely shifted, hasn't it?
It has, yeah. And it's obviously a bit troubling because but whatever, it is what it is, as they say.
Yeah.
I think the key thing is, sorry to jump in, is how transparent that certification is. Yes. The quality of the certification and the transparency around that is key, yes. And will there be any digital records on that anybody can query? I suspect not.
Yeah, and that you know, the whole rationale for making that change of focus from private sector to public sector, you know, from the agency set up to the more formal local government setup, seems to have, you know, it was important when it was announced, but is now less important.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, what we're going to achieve from it all really is the wonder.
Yeah, when you consider the importance, I saw a blog yesterday, or not a blog, but a post yesterday that Matt Hodges-Long was involved with, and he's been doing some analysis of how much is going to be charged for getting the certificate of occupancy, and he's I need to read it properly actually, but I think he was suggesting it looks as though it's going to be like about 11 grand per block. So that becomes quite a big figure.
His posts are well worth reading. Anybody who hasn't actually seen them, he really does take. He'll take something and put figures on it. And he's the only person I've actually seen do that to the extent that he does.
Yeah, he's good as Matt.
Okay, anybody else got anything to say on that question one?
Well, yeah, sorry, hi. How you all
Hi,
doing?
Brett.
Hello, Brett.
What do we actually mean? Which buildings are in scope under the BSA and the FSA? Well, they're two different things. There's different types of buildings in scope of the two different legislation.
Agreed.
So BSA, it's quite simple, high risk buildings, which are over 6 stories or over 18 meters. And the Fire Safety Act, well, all buildings with 2 or more domestic dwellings.
Yeah.
So that's very distinctive, isn't it? Really. And that's the answer to that question in my view.
Yeah, the point about it though is that a lot of people aren't they're conflating the two things. And therefore, you know, they're to some extent, I've heard people say, well, we haven't got any buildings over 18 meters, so we don't need to do anything. And actually, a lot of the like the beefed up version of Regulation 38, for example, where now landlords have got to, or the responsible person, which typically is the landlord, they're now required to explicitly state that they've received all of the information that they need. Now that's new, and I think that's under the Fire Safety Act rather than under the Building Safety Act, but it's all wrapped up in the same legislation, as it were. And it doesn't really matter which legislation it's in. I mean, I'm going to cover a bit of that when I do a bit, but yeah.
It's also worth mentioning here that with the secondary legislation that's just come out, it has actually redefined what 6 stories is.
Yes.
If the basement ceiling protrudes, don't ask me the figures, but protrudes much less than it needed to protrude before, then suddenly the basement becomes a story.
I think the other point is that obviously everybody's trying to do as you know the minimum that they need to at the moment because of funds, but I think it's widely understood that it's going to drop to below 18 meters for you know, in due course, and certainly that's the way the legislation's been written.
I mean, yeah, I agree. We're definitely trying to contain the spend, but we're also definitely working hard, you know, in our sort of meetings and groups internally, working hard to interpret the requirements correctly so that we register everything that we need to register. But you know, it's getting that definition correct. What do we need to register? You know, and then you have to kind of swallow the cost of it, don't you, to get on with it. But yeah, that's the primary driver, is to get it right, you know, and it would be helpful if we could have clear definitions before
Without
the
doubt.
requirement to register.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So by registry, I suppose you mean your high-rise buildings.
Yeah.
Which are determined. I mean, the way we do it is we're measuring our buildings, anything over 18 meters up to the top story habitable floor,
Well,
or
yeah.
more than 6 stories. We measure them according to the proof document B. And what we do is we've had that kind of statement of intent, if you like, looked over by the London Fire Brigade, who gave us approval on that.
Yeah.
So that very distinctly defines which buildings we need to put the safety case together for.
Yes.
I mean, you're right though, earlier as we was talking, there is some grey areas under the Building Safety Act. The Building Safety Act defines what needs to have a safety case and so on. But also quite recently, the updated part of this Building Safety Act was section 156, fire safety responsibilities. That also talks about buildings under the scope of the fire safety order, and it's mainly about information to residents. So that was quite interesting, which they updated that section in July, I think it was, and didn't really tell anybody about it.
Mm.
So, and that's actually kind of, I mean, what we're reading into that is the fact that duties of responsible persons which contain 2 or more sets of domestic premises, so they're referencing a statement which has really come out of the Fire Safety Act. So we're getting crossovers now, and it's almost saying that you've got to inform all your residents of any things like any risks identified in the fire risk assessment, fire safety measures, the name and address of responsible person. So it's really detailing a lot of information that we need to provide to the residents now of all premises with 2 or more domestic premises. So I think that's quite onerous, in my opinion. We're working out a way to do that now.
Yeah, the other thing that we've interpreted, just in, you know, cause I think everybody's having to do this at the moment, aren't they? And therefore, if we can share what we're learning and our interpretation, I think we stand a chance. Because anyway, so one of the interesting things for me is the whole process of a responsible person then passing on information to another responsible person, and at that point in time they have to verify that they're providing all of the information. Now, that, you know, what springs to mind for me is as built information, because there's not a great deal of high quality as built information on existing buildings. But yeah, anyway.
Sorry, George, can I interrupt you? Because we're going to see nicely from there into your presentation. Has anybody got anything else they want to say about on question 1?
Yeah, I think there's a principle that we need to feed back at this event with the levelling up lot. Is with any regulation, the first thing people have to do, or standard, is you have to interpret it, yes? And they could have made that a lot easier. Why they're not applying some decent AI on this to aid the interpretation, I don't know. You know, it's entirely possible now, we can do it. You know, it's just not good enough. And they've failed to see that that's, to me, that should be in their duty of care, facilitating that interpretation. Yes, so it's clear.
Yeah, I think that's a very very good point. Yeah, because at the end of the day, they must have some responsibility for making the thing intelligible, mustn't they?
Yeah.
Okay, right, George, would you like to start to question 2?
Yeah, so
Hello?
sorry, did somebody speak? Me? Yes, yeah.
Hi. Yeah, my mic wasn't working.
All right, okay.
I had to log out and come. Hear me?
Yeah, can now, Cliff. There's something you want to say?
It's a bit faint, Cliff.
Yeah, on question 1, it feels that we kind of know what falls within the scope, but it might be good to ask the question about what's in the future scope for these buildings, what's coming up, but also buildings that are on the drawing board that are under construction. How will they be affected by this? If
You're breaking up, Cliff.
signed off the design, and now suddenly you have to add in another staircase.
Yeah,
Cliff, you're breaking up quite badly. Could you put that in the chat for me? Because I think what you're saying is very important, and I don't want to miss it. George, can you elaborate on that from what you've heard?
I wasn't sure actually.
Now, sorry about this.
Yes, that's better now. Try again,
Okay.
Cliff.
Is it any better now?
Yes.
Yes, it seems to
Yeah,
be,
I'm
yes.
trying again. Okay, yeah. I was just saying, because I heard what was said before, and it seems that we're quite clear on, you know, what currently, which buildings need to currently be registered.
No, it's
under this
going again,
Act.
Cliff.
But I'm just thinking about.
Yeah, it's cutting out, mate. Can you
Okay,
put it in
I'll
the
put it
chat
into the
for me?
chat.
We'll have it. And I
Okay.
think that's the best solution. Sorry.
Yeah, so the second point was this thing about principal designer and principal contractor. And a number of the people that I've spoken to have seen that as being principal designer under CDM, whereas what's been made clear to me by you know, various people who are experts in this, there's quite a difference between the BSA principal designer and CDM principal designer. So the principal designer for the Building Safety Act is something that is a clear duty, and I'm seeing that a number of architects are now taking on that role, whereas they weren't interested in doing it before, because obviously it carries quite a lot of risk. Does anybody have a view on that?
I have a question more. Is it a natural migration for somebody who is, you know, competent as a CDM principal designer to move into being a BSA principal designer? You know, that's a competency evolution question, yes? I'm not clear about that, and some people are asking that, yes? So, you know, and if you've got people who are running registers around this, you know, it seems to me that they're sensible, that they need to log if you're a BSA principal designer or a CDM principal designer, yes, or just a designer, yes.
Yeah, my understanding, Debbie, and there's probably people more knowledgeable than me on this on the call, but my understanding is that the fundamental difference, or a fundamental difference, is under CDM, the principal designer doesn't need to be a designer, because what they're doing is managing the design process. Whereas under the BSA, part of their duty is to ensure that building regs are being complied with. And therefore, I believe they need a stronger understanding of the design, and ideally the design of that particular project. So that's why an architect, for example, who is working on that particular project is in a good place to be the principal designer of that particular project. But the role is to ensure that not just they, but all of the other designs are complying with building regs. So you need to have quite an in-depth knowledge of building regs.
Yeah, but the question in that as well, using the word compliance, is are they also responsible for the human compliance of competent actors in that? And again, I get asked that question, and it's not easy to trace back to the Act.
Yes. I don't know the answer to that, Debbie. Does anybody else have a sorry, carry on, Debbie.
We could raise that one as a question if we don't have a full answer.
Yes. I mean, certainly as far as, you know, the people that are on this call, like Brett and Bex and Claire, who are landlords, your duty, or the duty of the landlord, is to appoint a competent principal designer. So the point that you've just made there, Debbie, is well made, because how do you make the assessment as to whether somebody is competent?
But also it's if responsibilities are allocated to do to do other work down the chain, it's ensuring that they're also ensuring that those actors are competent and meeting compliance requirements in accordance with the regulations.
Yeah, one of the architects that I've spoken to that is now providing that, or planning to provide that role, and they're discussing it with their PI insurers at the moment. One of the areas that they are concerned about is, although as an architect they are comfortable that they're competent to do that, they're also, as principal designer, they're also overseeing M&E and structure, and they don't have the knowledge and expertise for those two disciplines. So what they're doing, and they're building into their process a series of questions and templates and things that they can use to analyze or question the other design disciplines. Okay.
Okay, that's one way of doing it, but it's not a very intelligent way, but hey ho.
Yeah, if you've got any suggestions as to how that could be done better, Debbie, I'll introduce you.
Cheers, George. Thank you. But for me, it's this sort of fundamental bit of, it's the word compliance, yes. And to me, compliance isn't fully met unless the human aspect of the compliance element is addressed as well, yes.
Yes.
But, is that really, is it implicit in the act or is it explicit in the act?
I don't know. Does anybody else know? Deafening silence.
Oh, well, then it's a key question I think we need to bring up, yes, because I am getting asked it. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, the competency required. Yeah. Richard, back to you.
Sorry, I was waiting for you to do your presentation.
Oh, right. Okay. Sorry. I thought we were talking about question 2, the point 2.
Sorry, aren't you on question? Isn't your presentation question 2?
It covers it.
Right. Oh,
Yeah.
right. So do you want to go into competency first and do you
No.
at the end?
I mean, in fact, actually, I think you're right. I'll do my presentation now.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
George, can you share the presentation afterwards rather than taking notes?
Of course. No, absolutely.
Cheers, thank you.
Yeah, so this is just something that we've been working through, looking at, what is the golden thread, and what are the risks, implications, and challenges that it brings in? How is the information that is required built into a contractual requirement rather than not? Because if it doesn't go to the contract, then it probably may not be issued. How do you then verify that the information that you've received is fit for purpose? How do you then coordinate and integrate that information so that it becomes meaningful? And how generally do we make use of it going forward? So broadly, why are we doing it? Well, in large terms, what we're doing is guaranteeing that the work that has been done is what we should have always been doing. So a lot of what is being required now is compliance with building regs. So, people should have been doing that anyway. Also, a fairly obvious thing is to demonstrate that you're selecting products that satisfy specifications, which again should be really obvious, but often isn't. And then recording what was installed and that it was done properly. and then record when products and things have changed. So one of the things that we often hear is that information, it will be in the O&M, or it will be in the BIM model. And also, you know, I've heard it said many times, if building control have signed it off, then we must have had it. And the fact is that that's not the case.
George,
Also,
I'm sorry to interrupt, but it was missing one statement in that. It's also, you need to recall that if the product changed, that the installer or whatever, or the specifier, had the right competencies. Yes, if the product changes, you have to do a competency check. So missing statement, missing line in that slide.
Okay, I was thinking that was covered, but that it was done properly.
The trouble is with this is people don't think of that. They don't think of products and competency. A product has a function. If we know what the product does, we can interpret what the competence requirement is. Yes.
Yes.
So I think although it is inherently covered in what you've said, I still think at the stage we're at of people's understanding here, we need to make it more explicit.
Absolutely. Would you mind just putting that in the chat so we can pick it up? And thank you.
I've also put a statement about what I mean by human compliance in the chat.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so one of the key things that I think the Act is bringing in is that you can no longer transfer risk. You can assign responsibilities, but the landlord, the client, is still responsible. And the clarification of responsible and accountable persons, it sort of mixes. It's covered in different parts of the legislation. Also, the fact that the new amendments that came in August require that the responsible person must confirm that they've received the information, and also that they're maintaining that information, and that's backed up by very substantial penalties. This is the wording that's in the amendment that came through. I think it was on the 20th of August. So, and I think that's a big step forward, that rather than, because often in many cases I've come across, there's no sort of formal check of the information. And this is within approved document B. It wasn't that clear as to what the information was that was being tracked. So this is just an interpretation that I've done from the documentation that's in the in Regulation 38. So these are the asset types and systems that are specifically named. But yesterday, on Monday, we had a meeting with the tier ones, and they identified that in Regulation 7, you've got products, and the information about these are the ones that are covered under Regulation 38, but the Building Safety Act also includes references through to Regulation 7, and these are all of the asset types that are considered safety critical assets in that element of the legislation, which is a much wider set of information. It surprised us that things like sanitary ware, for example, would be things that we need to build into the asset information requirements. But the safety risk there, it's not just fire. In this particular case, I think it's Legionella is the driver on that one. So whatever that information is, it needs to be accurate, up to date, accessible, and kept digitally. What does it mean to be digital? Is that adequate for it just to be a PDF document? In many cases it is, but you need to be able to audit it and validate it. And if it's just a PDF document, it's actually, even if you're using AI, it's actually quite difficult to validate that the information is there and is correct. So one of the things I think we're on a journey with is to see how we can automate some of this stuff, because otherwise we're just overwhelmed with too much data. So this is a little example from a project that we've been working on. This is something from the O&M handover, and on the face of it, it satisfies the requirement because it's showing where all the fire stopping is. But in practice, it's not really fit for purpose because all the labels are overlapping each other. And this particular PDF, somebody's zoomed out and then taken a screenshot, or that PDF has just been saved in that. So in other words, it's not really usable. Now, had the original PDF been provided rather than a snapshot of it, it probably would have been fine because it's probably interactive, but nobody checked. And that's because there's too much information to check manually. It also needs to be automatically updated when something changes. So when people are doing fire door inspections, for example, it's not good enough just to say that we've done the fire door inspections, tick in the box, because 80% of them could have failed. But in many cases, CAFM systems are only monitoring that has the fire door inspection been completed. The same with fire risk assessments. It's not just a matter of the fire risk assessment. I mean, I appreciate, people like Brett in particular on this call, you're all over this, but we've seen fire risk assessments where the actions haven't been monitored. And really, the way I'm looking at things, it's really like an accounting system that really it needs to balance every day the risk, the asset, and if things are outstanding, they need to be reported. One way of doing that is to provide specific information requirements, not leaving it vague. Audit what's received and reject it until it's right. And then ideally, the data should be structured so that it can be queried and easily updated. And importantly, that it needs to integrate with operational systems so that the safety management system, rather than a safety case report, which is just a snapshot in time, can be kept current so that any changes that are needed. So these are just some screenshots from the event that Bex and I attended about 2 or 3 weeks ago, which was done by it was organised by the Association of Specialist Fire Protection. But this particular one was this slide, the Building Regulations Compliance Statement. So these are the key documents. Also, this was new to me, and that is that if information isn't available, basically the landlord has to show what you've done to find it. So it's no longer good enough just to say, well, our O&Ms are incomplete or whatever. You have to also illustrate what you've actually done to find things. And if you don't have the information, let's say, for example, you don't have compartmentation plans, then that needs to be identified in the safety case report. So not knowing is a risk, and therefore that needs to go into the safety case report. And broadly, the onus is on the client to collate and submit the information. So broadly, that's obviously what we've been doing over the last couple of years, isn't it? Trying to pull that together so that we've got that information coming from the rest of the team. Now, everybody on this particular call has been involved in those sessions, so I don't need to dwell on that. But this is the way we're presenting this generally, and also providing some context for that knowledge. So the fire breaks out in the kitchen, what measures are in place that are going to protect the residents from harm, and reflecting the fact that different people need different information, different levels of information, and all of them are equally important. Again, all of you have seen this before, so this is really for people that haven't.
I haven't seen it, George, so I'm looking forward to going through this again and myself. Thanks.
Okay, yeah. And one last thing on this. What we've been doing, this is what we've been doing as Active Plan, but I'm just using it as an example. This is work that we're doing to do validation of O&M and handover information on a scheme. And what we're doing here is identifying the information that's needed for the for effective management, and to see whether information is missing or not. So this is just a way of auditing the information to see what's been provided, what is missing, and therefore to be able to chase it down. It's having a sort of a methodology to go through this. I was my daughter's got learning difficulties, and she was doing a jigsaw a few weeks ago, and one of the things that occurred to me was that if she lost the box lid of the jigsaw, she wouldn't stand a chance of being able to complete the jigsaw. And to some extent, I see this as being a little bit like the photograph or the image on the jigsaw puzzle, because it tells you what you're actually looking for. So that's it, really. I'll hand back to you, Richard.
Excellent, thank you. Well, firstly, comments. Anybody got anything any comments on George's presentation?
Yeah, I thought it was very good, George. Thank you. I'd like a copy of that, if that's all right.
Of course.
You mentioned the fire door inspections and fire risk assessments, which we've been looking at very intensely, as you can appreciate. And most people will have KPIs to do that, but you're absolutely right. How do you differentiate between a fire door inspection and then the risk evolving from that? So we're quite heavily KPI'd on doing those fire door inspections. That's what I report on each month, that we're doing them. And initially we thought, well, actually, if the doors fail, are we going to report that we failed on our KPI? Well, we're not. We've actually achieved our KPI to inspect them, and then the risk has been identified and the actions have been raised, so that leads to a second KPI on what we do about our actions, and those actions derive from fire risk assessments and fire door inspections and all sorts of other things as well we do. So it's a two-stage thing, really, which relates in KPIs, so we can actually prove that we're doing our best to be compliant on those parts of the legislation. So that was a very interesting point you raised about it's not necessarily just doing the inspections. That satisfies the legislation, but also you need to think about what you need to do to manage the risk after that.
Yes, and the other thing with this is that what we discovered was, for example, fire stopping. What you're expected to do is to go and I can see Sharon's on the call, so she'll probably I might be treading on your toes here, Sharon. But what one of the challenges with fire stopping that I see is that generally it on an existing building, it often kicks off with a fire risk assessment, and the fire risk assessment identifies that some fire stopping is required or is damaged or something like that, and then somebody will, a company like Sharon's will come along and actually do the work, and they'll maybe record it on Bolster or Plan Radar or one of these other applications. But what they're not doing in some cases is actually recording it against where that fire stopping, where that fire, where the penetration seals. I must stop calling it fire stopping. Penetration seals were originally. So in other words, that particular asset, we've come across situations where the report creates a brand new reference or ID against that particular penetration seal. So therefore, you lose the history of that penetration seal over the last 10 years, say. And therefore, and this comes back to fire doors, fire dampers, smoke dampers, etc. So any inspection that's done, I think, needs to actually refer back to the individual asset. And a penetration seal is an asset. And unless you've got good records of what all those items are, then I can't see how you're able then to properly track them. And the way FM contractors often work is that they will produce one work ticket to go and do an inspection of fire doors on that floor, for example. And therefore, if one of those fire doors fails, then the inspection fails. Yeah. So what the more advanced FM contractors are doing, they're identifying them as individual assets. And therefore, if one of 100 doors that are checked or one of 100 smoke dampers that are checked fails, it means that the 99 of them have succeeded, as it were. Sharon, would you say that what I've said there is reasonable?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as you were saying, if you've got an existing fire stop or existing service penetration, as soon as you come along, if it's been done in paper because it was in 1999, or if it was a different system because it's a facilities management company that's been swapped over, there's no indication of what you're picking up, what was there before, and the only photograph or image that you can supply to them is before you start working how you found that asset. So no, I think that's bang on the money.
Thank you. Yeah, and to a great extent, Brett, I mean, because you're at very much the sharp end of this. Therefore, if you're provided information at handover, or maybe that you've taken over a building from another housing association, the information about the individual assets is going to be increasingly important, I think, not just that we've got some fire stopping on that floor.
Yeah, absolutely. It's it's utmost importance. We're taking over buildings in London at the moment, and a few high-rise ones, and the information is just well, we're having to start from scratch, basically. It's a big pain. I mean, there was a question I was interested in your slides there about the safety cases, and the fact that if you haven't got drawings, you raise that as a risk on the safety case. I mean, what we're doing, because we're taking over some high-rise buildings in London that haven't got drawings, so we're getting drawings done as part of the safety case. So, but are you saying people are not getting drawings done and raising that as a risk in the safety case, and then how are they mitigating that risk?
I don't think they are. No, I think we're in new territory here as to what needs to go in the safety case, because nobody actually knows yet, do they?
Really?
Yeah. Well, I don't think any of the safety cases that have been put to Deluxe have actually, or the regulator have actually been signed off. Maybe I'm wrong by now. So what actually goes into a safety case. I think people have, people are producing them. Don't get me wrong, but I think everybody's learning.
Could I just ask Sharon, if we're not allowed, if the fire stopping is not the right term, what is the actual right one we should use? Because even if I look in a lot of the stuff that's being updated for, apprenticeship standards and stuff, they're still using the word fire stopping.
It's in particular, it's me that introduced that, but it's in particular Paul McSolly from Mace. He's very keen on calling it a penetration seal,
right,
rather than fire stopping.
I think that the task that we carry out is just a title that I don't think we'll ever get rid of. We've tried to, we call our staff fire safety technicians, because I wanted to try and elevate the trade. And the whole point of working with the SFP and Build UK, etc., was to try and separate ourselves from what I thought was quite a dismissive term, like fire stopping. Just seems quite, dismissive. And you've got joiners and you've got cabinet makers, and it's almost, it would be nice to give it a new title, but I think I'm pushing against the waves here. So I just have to admit defeat. But as long as everybody knows what it is, then I think half the battle's just getting it done right. So maybe I've just got to park that annoyance.
I think it's a bit academic, isn't it? Everybody knows what fire stopping is, and we know that it's a penetration seal.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that's a bit broad, to be honest, because it could be an acoustic seal, couldn't it? It's
same materials. The difficulty is you get air, thermal, fire, smoke, everything, and it's the same material, but it could be in a different. It's a red line, a blue line, a green line, or a black and white line. So it depends. But as I say, it would be nice if it could be given a more elevated status. It's life safety trade after all. But as I say, I think I'm maybe just barking up the wrong tree. So.
I agree with you, Debbie. I just, I think everybody knows what a fire stopping is, but how you elevate that, I'm not sure. But I do agree that it should.
I won't bore you with how it is possible in the competency domain and using AI to do that. It is possible to overcome this. Yeah, I mean, I think if we just keep it at the task level, that's okay. But it shouldn't be at the role level, and it shouldn't be at the statement level, because it should be more context aware, so it's more specific to what the actual situation is, or the asset and other stuff involved. So I think it's all right as a task, but I don't think it should be anything else than that.
Well, I think as part of the review with the FSSG, etc., I'm hoping that if there was any changes going to be implemented, it would come off the back of that and the competency pathway through the SFP. So fingers crossed.
Well, we're just going to come on to competency actually in a second. Claire.
Yeah, it was just I'm kind of surprised. I mean, I do completely understand what everyone's saying, but to me, the term fire stopping has always held this quite significantly high status, I think, because I don't know, maybe it's because of my side of the coin being more to do with investigating fires and working with my fire risk assessors, who are both ex-fire brigade persons. That fire stopping to me has always been, what's the right phrase? I don't see it as a technical thing. I see it as a real barrier, a life protection. So yes. To me, it's always held that's a kind of status as being a really important function, tremendously important, and something that we need to get very correctly right. So okay. There's just like the two sides of the coin really there, I think. So
very interesting. Thank you for that.
Yeah, perception is all, isn't it? Right, let's move on to Jess. Can you put the questions up and we'll go on to question 3? I know we kind of started that, but I think if we can just formalize it a bit. Okay, what is the impact of new competency requirements and the need for standard work instructions? Debbie, do you want to start this off, because you put a couple of interesting comments on LinkedIn, didn't you?
Well, I mean, I think if you take the Building Safety Act, it says that it can impose new competency requirements. Yes. So in the Building Safety Act, the word competency requirements is used. Yes, but a lot of people don't really talk about competency requirements. I wouldn't say that's naturally in a lot of people's DNA. And obviously, you know, that. But what's not clear in the Act is who makes what decision about competency. Yeah, it's not explicit in the Act. Which is
it should just be there, but who's actually going to determine that it is? Yes,
yeah. So and the other thing is the two other points that I made. I'm trying to remember what they were now. I'll come back to them. One is we had the interim industry competence committee. Now we have the industry competence committee, and we have absolutely zero awareness of what these guys are doing. Yes, or have done. There's no public information at all. I don't know whether that came out of that recent event you referred to, George, whether they declared any more about what they were doing. Yes. So I don't understand why it has to be, you know, so secret. We should know what they're doing. We should be able to see what they're doing. Why is it managed like this? Does anyone have any views on that? Or is it just because it's if I can be rude and say it's the same old group of people doing a lot of competent stuff that are sort of making their own new fiefdom? But I'm saying that. Yes, please don't put that in. The second thing is that there is a complete unwillingness, it seems to me, to realise that we've got lots and lots of new competence standards, most of them in PDF or Excel format, a lot of overlap and duplication, no consideration of using technology and AI to help people interpret and make sense of this and make it actionable and therefore traceable. Yes. So there's this complete blocker by any of these people who.
Well, can we take those 2 points separately, Debbie, to discuss them? The first one, what you wrote was what the ICC is doing and what the IICC did. There is no informational transparency, which I think is the first point you were making, isn't it?
Correct, yes.
Okay, so what does everybody else think about that? Is this something you're finding? Lack of information, lack of transparency? Anybody?
Or it's me. Competency is my domain, so of course I'm.
Oh, absolutely, but
not necessarily everybody is. But I just think the system isn't going to work unless it becomes a more transparent system. Yes, so I don't understand as a principle why they behave like they behave, and I have challenged John Vanstone on this. Yes, and it's like it's always right. We're going to inform. Soon you'll know more. Soon you'll know more. But I've been hearing that for over 18 months. Yes. So.
Yeah. Okay. And the second point, those involved in sorry.
Can I just say something on that as well?
Absolutely.
So in the regulations, there's I think it's the building regulations schedule 3. There's a schedule of competencies that is required by law for each piece of work. And it'd be really helpful if we had a similar one for, the work that we're undertaking as part of the Building Safety Act, the fireworks and such like, which I don't think is like explicit in it at the moment. So that that'll go into the competency actual requirements that we have something solid to a point on.
Bex, could I follow up with you on that? Yes, and just understand that and see, because I am there's some stuff that's coming out in the fire stuff from working group 2. It's more at the sort of installer level. Yes, so that may be part of the puzzle, but not necessarily all of it. But it's an absolute nightmare because they're extracting from other standards like IFATE standards and NOS standards, but they're doing it all in an Excel sheet. So you're never going to understand what's traceable to what. Yes. So there's just going to be more confusion in the way they're approaching doing it all. But they don't seem to want to take any advice from anybody that actually knows about managing competency data intelligently. So I try, but it's like a brick wall. So, but I'd love to follow up with you on that if possible.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Bex, just on not Bex, sorry, Debbie, just on that point, I'm assuming that you're talking with David Jones of the ICE on this.
Yes, I am. Yes,
Yeah.
I am. Yeah. But I am. But I'm also, independent as well of that, of their activity.
No, I understand that. I was just making sure that that particular bit of joining up is actually happening. Also, Chris Waterman's very interested in that whole competency area. He's a former educator, as you perhaps know, and it's an area that I did promise I was going to introduce you or him to you. So, yeah, it's an area that he's interested in.
Yeah, well, we're just about to test out, George, how to profile product data to inform competency requirements. So we're moving quite fast with some of our AI capability here.
Oh, that's good. Yeah,
Yeah.
We'll have a catch up on that.
Yeah.
Okay, your second point, Debbie, was those involved in setting competence standards and developing new ones are not providing the outputs in smart format when it is possible now to do that.
Yeah. And I'd also say, particularly when the agenda of other standard setters, ISO, CEN, BSI, are all going that way. Yes. Now, there's a different view of what they mean by smart. Yeah. Because we just had BSI guys review what we do in the competence space in terms of making standards intelligent. And so I just don't understand why there's no sort of consideration or leadership on it. Again, I think this is something that the Industry Competency Council should be taking an interest or a lead in.
Sharon, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, there is a passive fire protection NOS review underway just now, so I'm sure they would welcome more parties involved in that. And obviously the Kate Milford of Milford Mara are dealing with the competency pathway for the ASFP. So again, I'm sure if anybody was interested, if they can let me know, I can pass their details on.
Yeah, I'd be interested in the NOS stuff. I am in quite detailed negotiations with the NOS governance group at the moment to do some pilot stuff for them. Yes, so that would be helpful, Sharon. Yes, I'm also a Scot. I was born in Montefiore, but you wouldn't know that from the accent.
No, you wouldn't. Right, if you send me your email address, I'll just forward on the Jessica CITB email. Okay.
I'll put it into the chat, Sharon. Yeah.
Thanks.
Cheers. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Anybody else on competency?
Yeah, the other thing in there is what I think I probably contributed that, the thing of standard work instructions,
yes.
Which I think we do need to have more of, rather than so that you obviously we want as many competent people as possible, but we also need standardized instructions.
Is that what do you mean like the piece that Alan Oliver's putting together on fire door inspections, that kind of thing? Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. And Alan's also, for people that don't know what Alan Oliver's doing, or what we're doing with Alan Oliver has come in from he's been doing work over the years with the NHS on fire doors, and we've produced we've had a team. Some of the people involved in this group may have been on those working groups, but we're publishing shortly, aren't we, Richard? A set of fire door inspection standards, as it were. But
and others, George, others are also in the pipeline for other assets.
That's exactly what I was just going to say. That having done that, we're now doing the same for a range of other fire critical assets. In particular, I think it's smoke dampers and fire dampers and AOVs and things like that. So there's that's coming down the line, as it were.
George, it'd be great to test out taking that guidance in and seeing how it gets associated and linked to other standards. Yes, competence standards. Yeah, we could do that as a test.
Okay,
We can take in that guidance material.
let's do that. Absolutely. Thank you.
Is question 3, can I just clarify? This is about the client appointing a competent principal designer, is that right? Or is it the contractor as well?
It's the whole thing. Question
whole-
3
the
is
whole-
about it's about anybody that's undertaking work. The how you then assess and ensure that they're competent. So people that are installers.
Yeah, so that would need to get cascaded across the whole supply chain, wouldn't it? If you've installed if you've appointed a competent, what you think is a competent principal designer, then really it goes down to the person carrying out the design on an everyday basis and issuing the drawing to site. So does that drawing then need to be signed off and checked and approved by the competent principal designer? Or does that responsibility get cascaded down to the person actually designing, that plant room, for example?
I guess that's down to whatever the procedure is that the team has put in place to manage that particular project.
But I've got a kind of a bit of experience from this, from implementing BIM, and people didn't really know how to do it at first. So we sent out capability and capacity questionnaires to establish what the company's capabilities were. And not only that, but did they actually have the capacity? So, in terms of the software, they might have a few people that could use Revit, but they don't have enough licenses to do the project. So it's quite a broad question, really. Question 3, it's quite a big animal to tackle, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
I think putting capacity, that contribution there, Cliff's a good one. Could you drop that into the chat so that we pick that up?
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. We had that come up a lot, actually, when we had the discussions on the Fire Safety Act. It was all very well having everything loaded up to the cloud and all the information there, but did the fire station crews, the people at the fire station, actually have the capability of actually accessing it? And in most cases, the answer was no.
Yeah.
I think when you look at it, I call it the 4 C's: capability, capacity, competence, and confidence. And confidence, as you know, is the trust bit in the information thread. Yes, so I always call it the 4 C's.
Yes.
Okay. If nobody else has got anything else to add, excuse me, my throat's gone. What is the impact? We'll go on question 4. What is the impact of the two staircases being required for buildings over 18 meters? How is that impacting? How are you dealing with it, you landlords? Claire, how are you dealing with it?
Well, not really sure, but it's likely to be. I think the sort of early days thinking is that, are we going to try to avoid building buildings of taller than 18 meters? And we have tended towards that direction anyway.
We're hearing that a lot, actually. People are really trying. We're in the development group, pre-development group meeting the other day. People are really trying to avoid doing that, aren't they? But what about existing buildings? What about existing buildings over 18 meters? What are you doing with that? How are you managing 2 staircases in that scenario, Claire?
We've got 54 of them, so I don't know if managing's the right word.
But am I right in that it's not a requirement of buildings that are already in existence? So
it's only new ones, is it?
Only new
ones, yeah.
Yeah, it's not retrospective. It's only so existing buildings. If they got 1 staircase, you might like to look at the assessment and see if there's any further control measures you'd like to take, but they're not expecting to put another staircase in.
Right. Okay.
At what work stage does it kick in, Brett? So if, for example, you've got a building that's already going up.
It would be part of Gateway 1, which has been in place for a year and a half now. So I think that has already been addressed, because that's been in the regulations for a while, I do believe.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah,
what
all
about
buildings.
what about the other landlords? Bex, how are you dealing with that in terms of future builds? Are you looking to avoid buildings over 18 meters, or is that something that's becoming standard?
I think the short answer is we're probably going to think very carefully about building anything over 18 meters. However, because it's built into the building regulations to have 2 staircases, it's just something that'll get designed in it from Gateway 1, really, isn't it? So it's not, I don't think the impact's going to be huge. It's just a different way of designing a building.
Sure, I see. Yeah, because it's not respected. Retrospective makes it a whole different ballgame, doesn't it? Anybody else? I think that's quite a quick one.
Just to add, I mean, we're not doing a lot of new developments at the moment. There is one we're taking over next year in London, but that'll have 2 staircases, or at least I think it's about 3 staircases. But it's not something that we're avoiding. It's just basically ensuring that it's built to the current building regulations.
So basically, no biggie. Really.
No, not really. It's something that just needs to be checked through the correct gateways, and
not a disruptor.
Not for us, but then to be honest, in the development stage of those sort of buildings, we're quite small fry. It's not really applicable.
Sure.
I think it was disruptive about a year ago, though, because I did hear of a practice of architects that were in the middle of designing some buildings, and when the Act came in, they kind of stopped working on them until there was a bit more clarification.
Right. Yeah. If you're in the design stage.
Yeah.
Yes, I think this is very much a question for the construction group, because it will probably impact them a lot more with suppliers and architects and designers. But it has been in place for over a year now, so I think the fallout from the initial decision will fall away.
Yeah, it's already happened.
I mean, that's in there, Bex, because David Pope from Notting Hill Genesis, that was in his mind. So that's obviously something that is what was of concern to him.
Yeah, it's certainly germane, isn't it?
It'd be good to clarify the specifics of that question. Then, is it existing? Is it new? And what's led to that? Is it that question being a priority?
Yeah, he's in the development group, so he's leading the development group. So it would be new.
George, could you clarify what happens if you carry out remedial works or modifications, maybe through building control, whether that flips it from an existing building? At what point does it become compliant or non-compliant if there's modifications to the building as part of new development, etc.? You might know how to word that, but
yeah, what you've just asked there, Sharon, is what I was thinking as well, because one of the things that I've, as you know, I'm not an expert in any of this stuff, and the regulation 38 bit has caused me to think about at what point does it is something treated as a new build, or a new project, for example, because my understanding is that exactly as you've just said there, where you've got a significant remediation that then needs to go back through building control, and therefore it then falls into the same requirement to provide the information for regulation 38. That's exactly what I was thinking as well, as to how substantial it needs to be before some of these other measures kick in. And I don't know the answer to that. It's a good question, though.
I suppose that comes down to
actually. Can I interrupt, Sharon? You know what? Could you put that in the chat for me? Because we might pick that up as an additional question we do.
I'd love to, but I'm driving a transit van through Glasgow city centre while I'm listening in.
That's all right. Just can you?
Back.
Yeah, cool. Sorry, Brett, carry on.
I suppose yeah, I was just going to say, I suppose it falls into whether it's a refurbishment or not. And if it's classed as a refurbishment, then it should comply to the current building regulations. So my thought process would be, although this would probably be handled by a different team, would be that if it's classed as a refurbishment, we need to go through building control and all the relevant stuff with that. A building over 18 meters is going to be very difficult to install a second staircase. So
Yes.
you'd engage a fire engineer to justify you're doing a refurbishment. That doesn't require a second staircase, and the extra control measures you'd need to put in place to mitigate that risk. So that would be my thought process, really, engaging with a fire engineer at the early stages of design, engaging with building control, and getting it all signed off properly.
Bex.
Yes, thanks, Brett. Yeah, just to follow on from that, that's exactly how we see it. Also, the secondary legislation brought in different types of category work. So we've got category A, category B, scheme and exempt works. Category A works are subject to building control approval, as are some of category B. And at that point, you know, I think these things need to be considered, because I think category A works is the big stuff, and liaison then with builder control, getting advice from a fire engineer, it should probably just, we're looking at it to become due course to appoint one, just on a need to use basis for our projects. So it's worthwhile looking at that, and that brings another question that I have from looking at the secondary legislation. It is very unclear what a category B work is, because it says anything that's not category A is category B, unless it's scheme or exempt. That's a big question I would like answered.
Cool. I don't know the answer to that, but I think it is something that we can raise.
Yeah, that sounds. Bex, again, would you mind just bunging that in the chat for me so we don't miss it? Because that sounds.
Again, I'm also travelling, but I'll do my best to pop something in when I'm not travelling.
Thank you.
Okay, or just if you could just put something in or make a note of it, because I think we don't want to miss these points.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, anybody else on question 4? If not, we'll move down. Sorry, go.
Might there be an impact on insurance? So if you've got 2 staircases, it's more likely that people will be able to escape from the building and avoid harm. Whereas if you've only got 1 staircase, there might be less chance, and that might impact on the insurance of the building.
So newer builds will be easier to insure than older builds.
Possibly you might have cheaper insurance or something, and ultimately that is passed on to the residents. That cost.
Could I ask a question? Does the Act distinguish in terms of these obligations and stuff, the difference between retrofit and refurbishment, or see them all as one and the same thing?
That's the clarity that I think needs to be determined between
So,
category A and B.
I thought that
That's the
might be
A
the case, yes, because it's not clear to me sometimes, yeah. So, yeah, okay, thanks, Bex.
Okay, let's look at question 5. How are you dealing with the lack of detailed guidance around provision and operation of fire and evacuation lifts? So again, quite specific.
Richard, could I just ask a question that goes back to that, because it's just occurred to me. Fire doors, replacing fire doors, just picking on what Bex was saying earlier, the exemptions in the secondary legislation, one of the things I spotted was that some things are exempt, or the things that are exempt are quite limiting. So, for example, or limited, replacing a door, for example, isn't considered to be significant, but I'm therefore assuming that replacing all the fire doors in a building, that would be that would come under the requirements. Am I right, Brett, on that?
I wouldn't have
sorry,
thought so, no.
I can provide some clarity here, because I actually raised that because I'm leading a big fire door program, at Live West, and I requested that clarification from the installer, and they came back and they said, I do need to look at this a bit more, but they did say, you know, they didn't need building control sign-off for the works that they were undertaking. So I'm taking that with a pinch of salt. I'm going to do a bit of background reading and just to make sure, but that's their consideration on that specific question.
Sorry, did you say did or didn't?
Oh, sorry. They didn't require building control sign off.
I would tend to agree, but I'd be interesting if there's any challenges to that. I'd be interested in some feedback when you do some more digging, because yeah, a fire door is a significant bit of fire safety in a building. Replacing it, you're replacing like for like. You're not doing anything structural building. You're not changing the fire strategy in any way. So yeah, why would you need building control unless you are changing the design or the strategy in some way?
100%. And I asked the same question about compartmentation as well, because I'm doing the same across our HRBs on that. And it was a fairly similar response.
Yeah, I mean, basically, you're improving what's there. You're not changing what's there. You're improving what's there. You're bringing it up to a better standard than was there before. So
I think that's the crux of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I guess the question is whether it's building control. I did learn something, by the way, from that event that Bex and I went to, because I was talking to the guy who was presenting, Bex, from LABC, and he was explaining the fundamental difference between he touched on it in the presentation, but he went into a bit more detail when I was talking to him about the fundamental difference in the role of building control. It currently, or has been the case, that you've been able to go to building control and ask whether your scheme is acceptable and whether it satisfies building regs. They're no longer doing that. You have to go along and state that it is compliant and give the argument as to why you believe it's compliant, and then they will decide whether that's right or not. I don't know if everybody's aware of that, but my understanding is that's quite a change.
That seems like a massive change to me.
Yeah, so the building control is no longer effectively a free consultant. They are very much turning it around, that the team. And the other thing that he was saying was that because I was asking that because I've had this fed back to me a couple of times, that if it's gone through building control, then they must have provided the right information. And he made the point that that's completely flawed as an argument, because quite often the contractor that's carrying out the work or building the building for the landlord will say to the landlord, don't raise anything with building control. You know, you need to say that you're satisfied with it, because otherwise we won't get sign off. Now, I'm sure that may be few and far between, but he made that as a point to me as something that does happen, and you can see that can happen. Sorry, Bex.
I'm just saying, this sounds like a really big question that does need clarifying. Can we add this to the list?
Yeah, I think so, very much so.
Sure.
Jess, since nobody can write, can you make a note of the timestamp?
Yeah, I'll make the timestamp.
And then we can pick it up then from the notes. Sorry, carry on. Claire.
Yeah, so it again, it has similarities with the Health and Safety at Work Act, because it used to be a key difference with the Act, that in terms of it being criminal law, the burden of proof was reversed for the actor to, if called to court, to prove that they did comply with the law. And this is permeating, isn't it? Sounds like into these other areas of building law, that the client, or ultimately whoever has responsibility for instigating the work, is going to need to prove that they did comply with the law, and the prosecution will just have to be standing there saying, well, our job is just to say, prove it.
Yeah. Complying is no longer enough. You've got to proactively prove that you're complying. This is the point. Not even in many cases, not even when it gets to a court of law, you have to prove that as that's actually the regulation that you have to prove it to start off with.
Yeah, any enforcement, you'd have to have that. You must provide the evidence that you have complied and how you've complied.
Absolutely.
And therefore,
it's not a passive thing anymore. It's not just you just done it.
So therefore,
Oh, sorry, George.
Yeah, I was just building on just adding to what Claire was saying there. So I think the point is that this point about having the evidence as well, that you've done the work, that the work's been done properly, I think obviously is going to be critical to that.
It's evidence done by competent actors, though.
Yes.
Yeah. Again, it always comes back to that, doesn't it, Debbie?
Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely does.
Yeah, but a lot of people, again, they don't feel confident that this is really what the game is about, and that's because it's not as explicit as it could be in the Act and its associated guidance and stuff. So I think there is some commentary on that. Yes. Yeah,
I think absolutely the competence side of things has got to be it's got to be a very definite one of our questions and areas of interrogation. Right, just very, very quickly on number 5, which is around detailed guidance. How are you dealing with the lack of detailed guidance around provision and operation of fire and evacuation lifts? Is anybody dealing with that? Brett, are you dealing with that?
Not really, no. Is the answer to that. I'd like that question expanded, really. In what situation? For new builds, or?
I think it probably is meant for new builds.
Yeah, so we're not really experiencing any issues with that at the moment. As I say, we've taken over some HRBs, but we're not really taking over new builds yet. We will be next year, which we'll look at whether it's been built to the current regulations. It's I haven't really looked at the guidance, to be honest with you. So.
Well, to be honest, I think that's possibly a question that might get sidelined with we've got 2 or 3 subjects that have come up in this meeting, which are, I think, very significant that we need to be including in these questions. I don't think we really want to go more than 5, George, because it's time limits, isn't it?
I agree.
Okay, Claire.
I think the lifts question, it would be useful for us to know as a landlord, because we have lifts that are coming to the end of their life, and it would be good to be able to have a thorough understanding of how to upgrade to achieve, the next standard up, in terms of consideration of the scheme submissions.
Well, what are you doing, right, Claire? So what are you doing now? You haven't got this clear guidance. So what are you? Yeah. How are you doing? How are you addressing?
Relying on the advice of the lift manufacturers and contractors to say, we say to them, okay, what's our options? What the cost be?
Right. Yeah.
They come back and say, this is the cost for an evacuation lift.
Yeah.
Feasibility studies, and we're sort of deciding from there, really. But it does come back to competence, because we don't have anyone in-house that can thoroughly challenge what's provided by those feasibility studies. So
you have to trust it. You just have to trust it. Yeah.
You can test it with competitive pricing, competitive feasibility studies, but it's difficult to know which one's the best one without doing hours and hours of research.
Sure.
I think it's likely to perhaps become more of an issue when the government returns, if they do, to the question of evacuation and the fire brigade needing
Access,
needing to change the evacuation in a dynamic situation. So if there's an incident, can they evacuate the whole block, and how? The systems that we need to install to support that, and whether the PEEPs, personal evacuation plans, and all those that they sort of shelved after consultation, if that comes back into the discussion again, then if we are as a landlord to support the evacuation of the entire building that was designed and maintained as a stay put, how are we going to get people out if they have vulnerabilities and can't use a lift because it's not of the correct standard or appropriate standard?
Claire, I was introduced to somebody a few weeks ago who seemed a very sensible person. He's an independent lift consultant. So in other words, he's not tied to any of the big manufacturers. So if you'd like, I'll introduce him to you.
Well, that would be helpful. Yeah, thanks. Because we're kind of a bit stuck, thinking, well, what do we go for? We want the best situation, the best solution for the residents. Obviously cost is a massive influence, but how do we make those decisions in an informed way? It would be really good to have that extra support, really. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll make the introduction. Yeah. I'll be interested to learn more as well, because I think it's an area that we're quite light on.
Okay, unless anybody's got anything else pressing to say, then I think we're done. We'll be sending out invites for the 23rd, the November 23rd meeting over the next few days. So I hope it'll be coming along. Anyone you think that should be there, please invite them. Other than that, great meeting. We've got some great new questions to have a good old knock around with and include in the meetings. I think we're going to have quite a lot of questions. We're going to have to sift through them, aren't we? I don't know, maybe we'll have to do maybe 5 that we include in the meeting, and then another sheet of supplementary questions because it'll be added on the back or something, George, don't you?
Yes, and I'm thinking also that this building control question, that obviously, what the role of building control, just from what we've just been discussing there, I think what I'll do is I'll talk to a few of these building control specialists that I've been introduced to over the last couple of months, and get their take on it, and maybe we could do a special session for that. Or maybe include it in one of the other sessions that we're doing.
There's some big stuff coming out here, and it all raises another question, doesn't it? Another meeting, another question. Okay.
I've just thought of one more thing. I'll put it in the chat. But it seems to me there's also a concern around the competence piece. It's coming to me is that a lot of training providers don't want to take on the liability that they're responsible for producing competent actors.
Well, that's interesting.
Has come up a number of times. So so that's another consideration. Now, I don't believe training it rarely delivers competent actors. Employers should be responsible for ensuring they have, and organizations ensuring they have competent actors. But that is a concern of some of the training providers, which won't be good in terms of the sort of upskilling needs we have, yes. And also a huge amount of money is being spent by government on boot camps, yes, to do with, net zero and building safety. And I was asked by DFE to look at some of those, and so many of them actually have absolutely no relevancy or low relevancy to any relevant competence standard. So there's a lot of money being wasted.
Sorry, in that kind of situation, it so often falls to lowest common denominator, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because it's safe, but safe but not good enough.
Yeah. So that's another sort of barrier, I think. System
if you can if you can put that in the chat, Debbie, that'd be fantastic. I think what we may have to do is segment the questions into specific areas. Like there'll be one for competence, and there'll be one of those questions we raise in the meeting, and there'll be a supplementary sheet with other competence questions. There might be, and then we'll have like 5 sections, something like that. George, what do you think?
Yes, I think that's
could be like that, couldn't it? Okay, guys, sorry.
I'm sorry to be, you know, I'll be blunt, you know, there's not enough understanding of competence, yes, in the sector. It's still at its most basic, yes. I mean, is all reality, yeah.
Well, we've said this for 2 years, Debbie, that we need to do more of that in BIM4Housing. We still haven't done it, have we?
No,
so I think we.
Yeah.
I think we need to.
People don't understand it's a deep discipline, yes, and that it's more intelligent in some of its AI capabilities to deal with identifying requirements and all the rest, because we deal with human behavior and language, yes, and semantics. Yeah. So it's got a lot of benefits to other challenges in the built environment because of some of its AI know-how. But again, you know, people, I've honestly decided that I think there's bias. I think being a 62-year-old woman, and in AI, people just, you know, they don't take you seriously. I'm getting to that point now. I think there's I'm going to get a new avatar. I'm going to get a new AI avatar, yes, and see whether that cracks it. Yes. So, George, could we catch up? Yes, on a couple of things.
Of course.
And lovely to share those. I see Claire's laughing at that. Yeah. I'll try it, Claire. There's some great new technology that you can do that. Yeah, I've just discovered. Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah. I'm going to be a young man selling AI.
With that, I'm going to declare the meeting closed. See you again next time, and hopefully see you all on the 23rd.
Yeah.
Thank you. See you
Thanks
later.
a lot.
Cheers, guys.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.